One day, in a small American town, two pitbull dogs, Titan and Rocco, found themselves on opposite sides of a street. It was a familiar setting for both, a place where the tough and wild lived, and where dogs like them had no choice but to defend their territory. Titan, a large, muscular dog, had spent most of his life in the streets. He was feared by many, and his reputation as a fierce fighter preceded him. Rocco, on the other hand, was a younger dog, more agile and quick-witted, but just as determined to survive. As fate would have it, the two crossed paths that day. It started with a growl from Titan, a territorial warning. Rocco, young and fiery, did not back down. The two locked eyes, their muscles tensing, and without any more warning, they collided. The sound of their growling echoed through the streets as they fought with all their might, neither one willing to concede. People gathered around, some cheering them on, others too afraid to intervene. But even in their fiercest battle, something changed. As the fight wore on, both dogs seemed to slow down, their energy beginning to fade. Titan, exhausted from his years of fighting, found himself slowing down for the first time. Rocco, too, was growing tired, realizing that this battle might not be worth it. In that moment of hesitation, something unexpected happened. Titan, for the first time in his life, looked into Rocco's eyes, not as an enemy, but as another creature who had survived, just like him. Rocco, with his fierce determination, realized that they were not so different after all. They both shared a common struggle, survival in a world that often seemed indifferent to their suffering. Without a word, the two dogs stepped back, breathing heavily. The crowd around them began to murmur, unsure of what had just happened. Titan, usually the king of the street, stood silently, his head lowered in a rare show of vulnerability. Rocco, still wary but no longer aggressive, took a few steps back as well, eyeing Titan with a mix of respect and caution. And then, something remarkable occurred. The two dogs, instead of continuing their fight, began to walk in the same direction. No longer enemies, they moved together, side by side, as if an unspoken understanding had passed between them. The crowd, still in shock, watched as Titan and Rocco walked off into the distance, no longer fighting, no longer at odds. In the days that followed, the town buzzed with the news of what had happened. The people who had witnessed the fight and the subsequent truce between the two pit bulls began to talk. They saw something that they had never expected: two fierce animals, once enemies, now walking together in peace. It wasn't just a physical fight they had witnessed. It was the beginning of something much deeper. Titan and Rocco, those still street dogs, began to form an unlikely bond. The town, seeing the change in the two dogs, began to change as well. The people who once saw only aggression in the streets began to see the possibility of peace. They watched as Titan and Rocco, now inseparable, roamed the town together. They still had their moments of tension, but it was clear that something had shifted within them. As the weeks went by, the two dogs became symbols of change in the town. They were no longer just the fierce pit bulls that people feared. They were the embodiment of redemption. They showed that even the toughest among us could change, could find peace, and could choose a different path. Then, one day, a new family moved to town. They had heard the stories of Titan and Rocco, of their fierce fight and their subsequent truce. They were intrigued, and after some time, they decided to adopt Rocco. The family was kind and understanding, and they gave Rocco a home filled with love and care. Titan, who had always been a lone wolf, found himself slowly adapting to his new circumstances as well. With the townspeople showing him respect and kindness, he began to trust again. The once feared pit bull, now growing older, was no longer the same animal he once was. Titan had learned the value of peace, and although he still carried the scars of his past, he was ready to leave that life behind. As for Rocco, he flourished in his new home. He learned the joy of companionship and the warmth of a family. The bond he had shared with Titan remained in his heart, a reminder of where he had come from and how far he had come. Years passed, and the town continued to thrive. Titan, now an elderly dog, peacefully spent his days lying in the sun, while Rocco continued to live with his new family. The two pit bulls had come a long way from the fierce battle they had fought that day. They had shown the world that even the fiercest of enemies could find peace and friendship if only they were willing to change. And so, the legend of Titan and Rocco lived on in the town. Their story became a symbol of redemption, peace, and the power of understanding. The townspeople, who once saw only violence and aggression, now saw the possibility of a better world. One where enemies could become friends, and where peace could reign even in the most unlikely of places.